Ladies and gentlemen, I'd also like to bring your attention today to our digital delegates, okay? So we are going out live streaming to all over the world, all right? So your tweets, your comments, your questions that will get asked, they will hear those as well all over the world, all right? But without any further ado, I would like to invite to the stage a visionary, an innovator, an entrepreneur, Tania, the founding chairman of Procurious, the faculty, the source, and a thought leader throughout the procurement industry. She's been trying throughout her profession to bring and connect the leaders in the procurement industry. So can I have a rock star round of applause, please? Tania Seary.
Thank you all very much. Great introduction. Look, if everything goes to plan today, you're going to hear a lot of big ideas. That's the theme, right? So the big challenge, though, is how do you actually go back to the office and implement these ideas? We all know we go to these conferences, we get all charged up, but how do you actually go back to the office and make some of it real? Ron Brown, one of our founding roundtable members, always says you only need one idea, or was that you, Tom? But you only need, or Curly out of City Slickers, you only need one thing to take home today. And I think when we talk about RPA, AI, cognitive, all these new technologies that we're calling Procurement 4.0, it can all get a bit quite confusing, but we have to understand this is our moonshot opportunity to change the trajectory of our profession. I've been in the game for probably a couple of decades now, and from where I sit, this is probably some of the most exciting technology and biggest opportunities we have to get out of that strategic sort of or backroom malaise and into the strategic stratosphere. So it's a really exciting time to be in the profession, and I hope that you all see it as an opportunity rather than something to be afraid of. So our idea at Procurious, the roundtable, and here today is to make sure that you're in the driver's seat for all these exciting changes that we're going to see, and then you're not left on the launch pad watching everyone else take off and that the profession's sort of left to wither and die in the background. So that's our opportunity, but I think the thing we need to look at first is ourselves, and if we're looking at change and the future, we have to be the best in the world at driving change throughout our organisation. So that's really what I wanted to share with you this morning, some insights. And I wanted to share a couple of personal stories, one of which was a little trip. You've probably all been to the Smithsonian in DC many years ago, or well, I was, probably 20, 30 years ago. And I remember looking at the space capsule and saying to my girlfriend, those guys flew to the moon in this. I said, this has got the same technology as my first car, which was a 1969 Toyota Corolla. And I thought, hang on, that was the latest technology then. And I guess my key point here is that we all might be sporting, I can see some 20, 30, 40, 50-year-old bodies. But what we have to make sure is that we've got 2018 software and that we're actually up to date with what the latest trends are, particularly the technology, and that's what we'll be sharing today. Of course, when we're driving change, the first place we have to look is in the mirror, and this is a really personal belief that I hold about leadership, is that the only common denominator in your career is you. It's often easy to blame your boss. They're always the first victim, I know that, being a boss for many years. Your peers are holding you back, your stakeholders. But at the end of the day, you can't change them. The only person you can change is you. And I think that's a really important lesson to learn as you're sort of pushing your way through your career, because let's face it, it can often be frustrating when your big idea can't get through your big company. So here's some of the reasons that I've heard a lot over the years, and I'm sure some of these are familiar to you. And really what I want to do is share why you might be frustrated with getting these big ideas through. In my view or experience, companies are usually going through one of 6 big changes, and Scott from our team, Scott Stewart, who's doing the 6 phases of the CPO research at the moment, actually developed this dial. And I'm sure these are familiar to you, particularly the cost down scenario or the transformation. And, the thing is that these directions are set from the top. Your chairman, your CEO are going to give these directives, and unfortunately you have very little say in where they're going. And I think the challenge is to actually recognise which phase you're going through. And as we know, there's often 2 or 3 phases going at the one time, and status quo is never one of them. So really stepping back and thinking, what is happening with my company? Why am I so frustrated that I can't get my project through? Then you've got to look at yourself. Probably you've developed your career and you've been recognised, you've been recruited, you've been promoted based on your own personal work styles of working. You might be known as the cost reduction guy yourself. You might be known as the innovation gal, or the person who can bring everyone together, or the compliance person. Now, as we know, heaven is when your working style aligns with where your company is going. So, heaven is probably when you're the innovation person and Steve Jobs comes back on the planet and he's your CEO. Or you're the cost down guy and Warren Buffett's your CEO. But as we know, life is very rarely like that. And what we have to do is to make sure that we recalibrate, rebrand and reposition ourselves for success. So now that we've sort of had a Bondi Beach Zen-like moment or two looking at ourselves, I think it's important to look at what's happening with the organisation and how we're going to drive change with others. The good news is the profession knows that it's changing, and Tom Derry, who's here from the US, from ISM, is going to share that later today. Everyone knows that things are changing, that a lot of what we do is going to become automated. And as Hugo's recent research showed, over 90% of people believe that we're going to change into a strategic group of advisors or commercial advisors, an agile group. So this is all good news. Everyone knows that we're going to change. And I think this supports our view that into the future and under Procurement 4.0, we're going to be at the centre of a technology-enabled network that is going to require us to really collaborate with a very vast amount of suppliers. And when Watson and AI and cognitive or RoboBuy are all pointing us in different directions, it's going to be us who have to stand in and resolve the issues. We're going to have to be the humans and use our humanness in these discussions to resolve conflict. So I think that's one of the things that we need to also focus on, is actually retaining our humanness. Because let's face it, a lot of companies are pushing us almost to be robotic. You are expected to be on a teleconference till at 11 o'clock at night, then in the office for a 7 a.m. breakfast meeting, fly 14 hours, hop off the plane, go to a meeting, or even go through a life-changing event like losing someone or having a child and then be back in the office at hypergalactic speed. So we have to kind of resist these forces and make sure we focus on our strengths, which is being able to collaborate, influence, and actually bring people together. I wanted to quickly share a couple of stories, and if we could not share this on social media, says the social media queen, because I haven't got their approval. But I think if I look at a couple of benchmarks of people that I've been fortunate to meet over the last few years, Prince Charles is a huge supporter of Australia in the UK, and he gets involved in a lot of community organisations and arts organisations. I've been very lucky to meet him a few times, and when I have, it hasn't been like, well, tell me what's happening with the Australian political situation, Tania, or, how's that arts organisation going? No, it's very engaging, everyday conversation, as you'd expect in Buckingham Palace. How are things going? Oh, you brought your neighbours. Oh, very human, very connecting. Something a bit closer to home is this gentleman, the outgoing CFO of Rio Tinto, who a lot of you know is actually my husband. And, a lot of people, I think Chris has taken out, I forget the numbers, I think Rio's got 100 billion market cap. They've taken out 8 billion of costs or 8 billion of debt. Big numbers. And a lot of people that I know have gone to meet with him on business issues have been really scared about meeting him because he is the ultimate CFO toe cutter. There's no doubt about that. He's very kind to me, but yeah. But the interesting thing is that when people come away from a meeting with him, they go, oh, gee, that was so much fun. We talked about cricket for 55 minutes and then we, talked to business for 5. And this is my point, is that in the future, if we want to lead, if we want to drive change, we need to develop these relationship skills, these soft skills, this engagement. And the technology is going to help us do that because all the data will be taken care of. We won't need to dispute numbers. We won't have to worry about that. but we will have to worry about relationships. A lot of people think that change is this really organic, creative process, and I actually think the opposite. I think that change is a very systematic process, and another favourite saying is process is liberating. And I think once we have our processes and our data locked down, it'll actually give us the freedom to innovate and build these trusted relationships. So I think that's one thing to really think about is, are your processes in order? Driving change is like trying to get a large Trojan horse through your organisation. So I wanted to share my little experience from Disney, and I'm going to go through this really quickly because I know that you're keen to hear from our superstar speakers today. Many of you may already know that I used to work at Walt Disney when I was sort of just a few years ago, in my 20s, in London. And I learned so many things. I mean, Disney is the ultimate marketing machine, as you all know. And it's something I've written a few blogs about, and there's a video, which is about what I learnt there about driving change. And if you look at the Disney formula, it's about the book, the movie, the merchandise, and the ride. And I just encourage you to think of that as a bit of a framework. We're all used to having a business case for our big idea, for driving a big idea through our organisation. Key point is to make sure that you build engagement while you're building that business case. It's absolutely vital that you get finance, the operations, whoever you're driving in, to buy into your story. Of course, the movie is the short condensed version, which we're all very good at, doing the PowerPoint and getting around. The merchandise, I don't suggest you go out and buy costumes and the sort of paraphernalia you see in the Disney store, but you do need to think more about marketing and how you're going to communicate your message. Where Disney makes all their money is in the ride, and this is the boring, monotonous part that I was referring to, is you need to go on the ride over and over again. If you're driving change in a large organisation, you really have to repeat your messages over and over again. One CEO told me like 11 times you have to go and touch people to get your message through. So that's my little Disney story. As I said, there's a blog and a movie, the book, the movie, the ride, no joking, and for you to share, but it is a worthwhile analogy. I guess some closing points would be that if you are going to get one of these big ideas up in your organisation, you're really going to have to be committed to it. Let's face it, if it is a big idea, it'll probably take you 2 or 3 years to really get it implemented. So you really have to be committed to the idea and to seeing it through, because you're going to be knocked by a lot of people. And I think using the age-old, start with a pilot and then implement. I've got a point here about picking a sponsor carefully, and I really wanted to reinforce that. If you're introducing something really sexy like an AI or an RPA or a cognitive project, or really anything that is truly a good idea, you're going to have a lot of senior people that want to sponsor you and to, cozy up alongside you and own the idea. It's not easy to identify, but it's really important that you make sure this person really is committed, because if they're sponsoring you just for political reasons, they're going to drop you as soon as it becomes unpopular. So not always an easy thing to identify, but really make sure that your sponsor is in it for the long term. I think the other thing about sponsors is make sure that you use them wisely. Just bring them in for the photo opportunities, the good times, and the key decision makers. Don't, sort of keep your powder dry and make sure you use them wisely. I think the last thing is obviously be human. Your relationships with people throughout the organisation is what's going to get it across. And my last point, the worst song probably ever written in the history of mankind, when you get knocked down, make sure you get back up again. Thank you.